On this fall day outside New York City, the Sierra Club is leading a group of veterans on a hike on Bear Mountain. But getting there isn't easy for everyone.
I have to take one bus on First Avenue to 42nd Street and First Avenue, and then normally I wait 20 to 25 minutes to board the next bus, which is cross town from 42nd Street to Grand Central Station. Most of the time it takes me like an hour and a half.
An estimated 100 million Americans do not have an accessible park within a 10-minute walk of their homes. A lack of transportation, outdoor experience, or outdoor education and other barriers prevent many from experiencing the full benefits of time spent in nature.
Beautiful.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very special Transit Equity Network meeting for the month of June 2024. My name is Bakari Height. I'm the Transit Equity Organizer with the Labor Network for Sustainability, and we thank you all for joining us today. Now, we're going to get into what everyone's been waiting for. We're going to get into the discussion about Anna Zivarts' new book, When Driving is Not an Option. But first, I wanted to let you know about something really quickly of an event that's going on. Shut down DAPL rally. So essentially, they're having a rally in Washington, D.C. on June 11th at noon to protest the Dakota Access Pipeline. If you all have known that this pipeline is going to be affecting a lot of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribes. So there's going to be a rally and a march to call on President Biden and his Army Corps of Engineers to stop the Dakota Access Pipeline. So if you'd like to join in this, I will definitely put a link for the RSVP in the chat. If you're watching us on YouTube, for whatever reason, our Facebook stream is not working. But if you're watching us on YouTube, definitely click the link in to register for an RSVP for this event. Or if you're watching us on your TV or on your smart device, definitely scan the QR code and you can be transferred to this. But we thank you all so much for this, and definitely if you're in the DC area or if you would like to attend this, definitely do so. But thank you to our friends for definitely sharing this with us. But without further ado, I will definitely bring in Anna Zivarts in. Anna Zivarts is a low vision parent, non-driver, and author of the book, When Driving is Not an Option, Steering Away from Car Dependency. Anna created the Week Without Driving Challenge, which I'm wearing the hat of, and is passionate about bringing voices of non-drivers to the planning and policy-making tables. Anna, thank you for joining us, and such a really wonderful, beautiful outlook that you have out there.
Good morning. It's great to be here. I'm actually joining you from Idaho today. I'm at a planning conference, and long story, but it's very hard to get here. And so I was presenting yesterday and got a ride, and I'm waiting for my ride back today. So I am presenting from a beautiful lake in Idaho.
Wonderful.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. We're definitely excited to start talking about your book, but tell us how you got to this type of work. For those who don't know who Anna Zivarts is, how did you get to this type of work, and what experiences have you had that captivated you to write this book?
Yeah. So I guess it starts with my own story. I was born with an eye condition, sort of a neurological condition that they don't really understand totally yet, but it's called nystagmus. It means that my eyes shake all the time, little tiny movements like that. And my brain has trouble processing the visual information coming from my eyes that are shaking like that. So my vision is limited. I've never not had nystagmus, so I actually don't know how I see the world, in comparison to how other people. But on vision tests, for example, I don't have 20/20 vision. I don't see well enough to pass a driver's license test. And if I'm looking out at a big room of people, I definitely can't recognize names. Or at conferences like where I am at now, reading name tags is always a struggle. Can't do it. So, I have a fair amount of vision compared to other folks, who are blind. But my vision is not vision that is considered sort of normal vision in our world. And so growing up, I didn't really think about the impacts on this on mobility and how I was going to live as an adult until I was a teenager and my friends were getting driver's licenses, and I went to the DMV and tried to pass the vision test, and that wasn't going to happen. And so I felt really stuck. I didn't know other adults who didn't drive. I lived out in a really rural area, and there was no bus, there was no sidewalk, and so I had to ask my mom or my dad for rides anywhere I wanted to go. And I had heard that New York City was a place that existed and had a subway that ran 24 hours a day. And that was sort of like this dream for me. And so when I graduated from college, I moved to New York City and I lived there for a long time. And it was a wonderful place to be as someone who couldn't drive, and having that subway access. And I didn't need wheelchair access. I know it's not a great place for transit if you need elevators, but for me, having the sort of frequency and network of subways and transit in New York City, and buses to get out of the city, and more, like those things were really wonderful. And then I had a kid, and he was born with the same eye condition, and this was a real shocker for me. I had not realized it was genetic, and it made me look at myself and recognize that I had a lot of sort of internalized ableism. Deep, self-doubt. And I was really couldn't talk about the fact that I couldn't see things without crying. Like that's how sort of difficult and painful it was for me to talk about my visual impairment. And living in New York City, I didn't have to tell very many people because everyone there got around on the subway, and I wasn't like, oh, well, come to my house. Oh, I can't get there. I need a ride, which is sort of the way it would be in the rest of the country. And so when he was born, I sort of had this moment of reckoning, and I recognized that I needed to accept this piece about myself if I wanted him to feel comfortable with that part of himself. And so through that, I became connected to the disability community, mostly through Twitter at that point. Alice Wong, who's an incredible disability activist, really just following her and learning from her on Twitter, and sort of the network of folks that she was connected to really brought me into a space where I started to see that I wasn't alone, and that brought me to working for Disability Rights Washington back in Washington State, where I grew up. And there I started doing a lot of work around transportation access, started to meet many other people who couldn't drive, couldn't afford to drive, and started doing organizing work, which led to this book. That's a very long answer, but that's how I got here.
Absolutely. And you mentioned growing up in Washington State, and I saw in one of your articles that you mentioned is that 12.8% of the Washington State residents have some sort of disability, which is a staggering number. So, I think that really does kind of speak to the whole point of, who are non-drivers to you? I mean, is that the general audience of this book?
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason I wrote this book, right, was so that people like who I was as a child who, grew up disabled and didn't think there were other people like that out there, could see that, you are part of a larger community. But disability is tricky, right? I mean, there's all kinds of disabilities, and from vision impairments that can limit driving to mobility impairments, neurological conditions, epilepsy, chronic health conditions, traumatic brain injuries. And, the ways people's driving access can be limited is really different, depending on the disability, right? Like if you need a vehicle with, hand controls, that's one thing, and you can't afford them, then you can't drive a normal vehicle. Or perhaps you have a chronic fatigue condition where some days you can drive, but other days you can't. And so, there's all kinds of disabilities that limit driving. There's also people who wouldn't necessarily identify themselves as disabled, but have a limitation to their ability to drive. And I think about, people, many people, for example, with mental health conditions, anxiety or PTSD wouldn't necessarily, don't all think of themselves as having a disabled identity, but that's, could limit their ability to drive. Or, seniors, folks who are aging out or driving. Many, of them would not want to be considered disabled, but there are limitations to their physical bodies or mental mind bodies that limit how they can drive. And so I started to think about this in the work we did at Disability Rights Washington, starting to talk about it more as non-drivers versus as like disabled, because there also are disabled people who can drive, and disabled people for whom driving is the easiest way to get around. And so rather than defining it as this like disabled, non-disabled binary, let's talk about it as, non-drivers and anyone who can't drive either because of an access need or because of the cost of driving, or perhaps because of documentation status, because of age, young people who can't drive. All of our needs are pretty similar in that we need communities that can work without driving. We need transit, we need sidewalks, we need services close to where we live, we need affordable housing. And so, together we can organize for these things. And it doesn't have to be about a disability identity to do that.
Absolutely. And I want to read a quick excerpt from your book. It says, when I share the fact that a third of people in the United States can't or can't afford to drive, usually my audience is incredulous. Even among professionals in the transportation field, it's rare that someone grasps how many people are so profoundly excluded, if not severely limited by being able to just grab car keys and go. Was this a really big influence because there's still a lot of people that still believes that everybody has a car, everybody can drive, or even at this point where cars, whether gas or electric, are start at 30,000? Do you still believe that there's a lot of, or there's this mindset that everybody drives?
I think there really is. I think it's a little better in places on the East Coast where there are bigger transit systems and more people ride transit on a regular basis. But especially out west, and in communities that were really built around cars and car dependency, there is this notion that like everyone, or at least everyone who counts, right, who has a job, who is a working adult, like non-disabled, like those people all drive, and so that's who we're going to design the system around, because that's whose mobility we need to focus on. And that this 30% number is really shocking, I think, to people. And also, when I start to talk about it, there's also this, well, oh, okay, they're too old, they're too young, especially the young, people. They don't really matter. And I think, we have to sort of tackle what that means to discount such a large percentage of our population.
Absolutely. And you speak on, the elderly and young folks, those two large populations that are not necessarily focused on. And especially in this generation where a lot of young people are foregoing their licenses because of Uber and Lyft, and also going, like what you mentioned, going to cities where there is adequate public transit. But that's great that you point that out. And, kind of to dial it back with, we've had previous guest spots of, talking about people with disabilities on the Transit Equity Network in the past. And they've spoken on the injustices that they've faced in this built environment that's harsh for many who don't drive. Have you seen or witnessed any groups or any city or state governments that have kind of built into this system of using the basis of people that can't drive to drive a lot of transportation decisions?
I think that's an interesting question about where that's happening. I mean, we all just saw, even in New York City, where a majority of folks don't drive, like the conversation around congestion pricing, right? Like, where that is right now. I think it's a hard political sell, because in pretty much every community in the US, the people with the most resources and the most access to power are drivers. And so those needs are reflected in the way transportation systems get designed. I think, there's some things that give me hope. I think there are many transit systems that are really trying to do wonderful work, and really with limited resources, trying to provide excellent service, trying to upgrade bus stops so that they're accessible. I'm excited. I guess a couple of shout outs. Chicago, thanks to the terrific organizing of Access Living there, has just started a pilot for public snow clearing of sidewalks, which I think is such an important issue in places that do get a lot of winter weather. We clear our streets for cars, and then we leave the sidewalks a mess. And if you're disabled, that is really, you're stuck at home, especially if you're a wheelchair user and it snows and the sidewalks don't get cleared. And so that gives me a little hope. I think, what are some other examples of places? One thing that I think we can start to talk about more and perhaps think about more is, because so many of our communities are so spread out and sprawly, right? That like the density is quite low. They're not really distances, things that you need to get to aren't distances that are walkable or rollable without e-mobility, right? But we have this new with the cheaper e-bikes. There's starting to be more e-trikes, which I'm really excited about, that are becoming more affordable. Better power wheelchairs. Hopefully, we start to see power wheelchairs that have that are weatherized, that can be in the rain without frying the systems, with longer lasting batteries. And I think these all give us the opportunity to, in a built environment that is so spread out, really start to have more connections that don't require a driver's license and don't require owning a car. But I think the other piece of that we have to think about is the places that these devices are going to be on the street. And we need safe and comfortable and separated places. And so I think cities that are thinking about trail networks and bike path, multi-use path networks, I think that also gives me a lot of hope. I lived in Tucson, Arizona for a while, and a lot of Tucson and then the streets design is just really hostile to pedestrians. But there are starting to be, there is the Loop, which is this trail that circles the city that can provide really great access for sort of getting around the exterior of the city. Other cities, I think, are doing really cool and interesting things with trails for mobility. Thinking about not just as recreation, but how do we do this so that people can use them to get where they need to go.
Absolutely. And at Labor Network for Sustainability, we're all about building partnership with unions, and you work with the ACLU. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So the ACLU, I worked there. I was hired a long time ago, to work at the national office for the LGBTQ and HIV/AIDS project. And I was hired as a storyteller there, and a story finder, I think, was my actual job title, which is a pretty cool job title. And I got brought into a team where it was, around 2000, it was 2008. So a lot of things were moving very quickly and changing very quickly and in particular, the same-sex marriage space. And the lawyers that I worked with were really excited about that. But I think the leadership there really recognized that there was an importance in not only winning the legal cases, but also winning over public support to make sure that there was the public support behind the legal work that they could do. And so it was my job to sort of go out and figure out what were the stories that we could tell to convince people that this work was so important. And so, yeah, and I think that really actually influenced a lot of the work that I ended up starting to do in the disability community was, okay, asking someone to tell their story, like it is very vulnerable, and you are asking people to take a risk. And but it also, when you ask someone to do that, they also become part of the movement, and it's sort of an organizing tool as well. And so using it both to change public opinion, but also to build a coalition, build a movement, by having people be willing to put themselves out there and be public with their experience.
Absolutely, because we never know what stories are going untold. And huge shout out to Disability Rights Maryland. I know 2 years ago they had a lawsuit with the Baltimore City DOT as far as the lack of sidewalks and lack of mobility within the sidewalks, and especially like with older cities like Baltimore, especially with Philly, which a large amount of the septic system is still not ADA accessible. So, I think it is definitely important to tell those stories and making sure that a lot of this is going through the legal bounds to make sure that the built environment is made safe for all. So that's wonderful. I definitely commend you for doing that. So we're about to get into a video really quick about another program that you had called A Week Without Driving. Now, I was introduced to this at Transportation Camp DC, where I first met you. But it seems to have really kicked off, and especially in a lot of places. So let's take a look at the video.
A new challenge is shining a light on how difficult life can be without access to a car. Today is the first day of the Week Without Driving Challenge.
And the goal is to have all of us and our local leaders develop a better understanding of life for those who don't own a vehicle. A week without driving continues today in La Crosse with more free rides.
This week, the city of La Crosse is celebrating Week Without Driving with a special bingo game and by also offering free rides. Starting today, it's the nationwide Week Without Driving. And King County is hosting this challenge with more than 123 communities and cities.
Council member Claudia Balducci says across the board, about 30% of people don't have a car. That's why she and the council proclaimed the next 7 days as the Week Without Driving.
In Humboldt County, it almost feels impossible to get from point A to point B without a car. But those with disabilities and those who cannot afford to drive face that challenge every day. Council member Renee Contreras de Loche spoke from her own personal experience of using transit in the past.
Challenging, trying to figure out how we were going to get to music appointments, to school, to doctor's appointments.
The challenge isn't about not using a car. It's more about seeing what it's like not being able to have access to a car.
A quarter of Rochester households don't have access to a personal vehicle. So for a lot of Rochester households, this isn't really a choice.
I'm standing at a bus stop in Seattle's Soto neighborhood that doesn't have a shelter over it. That's just one barrier Disability Rights Washington wants the public and policymakers to become more aware of during its Week Without Driving challenge.
This week is a full circle moment for Durham Mayor Pro Tem Mark Anthony Middleton, who's taking the bus to and from City Hall, utilizing ride shares and walking to get around.
Any city that's going to consider itself a great metropolis, has to cross the threshold where the city is negotiable without a car.
Now, if y'all saw that, that was everywhere. California, Seattle, Denver, Wisconsin, Rochester, New York. Like, this program really got around. So tell us about Week Without Driving and how it came about.
Yeah, Week Without Driving. I love Week Without Driving. I love talking about it. We launched it here in Washington State in 2021. And the inspiration for it really was we'd done a lot of storytelling with non-drivers from throughout our state. And I wanted a way for those stories to connect with elected leaders and to start to, educate elected leaders about some of the barriers and gaps in our transportation systems and our communities that we could, get them to work with us to change. And, inspiration came from from the labor movement. Since we're in this space, you all will know Justice for Janitors and that work. And I had done a lot of work with the Hotel Workers Union back in my 20s and 30s. And I think at one point I was asked to make a video where then candidate Muriel Bowser in DC was shadowing a housekeeper from a hotel for the day. And we met the person at their house and transferred from the bus to the subway. And it was at that, or the metro in DC. And it was still then where you had to pay that transfer penalty. And that we had a really great conversation. I remember around, what that meant and as far as this workers' budget. And I thought back to that when I was thinking about, what we could do here in Washington State. And I thought, wow, this could be a way, like if we could get elected leaders to spend time with non-drivers, that would be amazing. And maybe we ask them to do it in the context of a whole week of their life so that they can, it's not just about picking one trip that's easy. It's about really experiencing the transportation connections in their community over the weekend, in the evenings, when they need to take their kids to sports practice, all those things. And so that's where it came from. We launched it in 2021. It was exciting that people actually did it without really having any sense of what it was going to be. In 2022, it grew even bigger here in Washington State. I think we had more than 50 elected leaders participate that year. In 2023, last year, we started getting a lot of emails from folks nationally who wanted to participate. And so we partnered with America Walks because they had the capacity to sort of help us bring it to a national audience. And so last year, that's where the video's from. We had communities participate in 41 states. Really exciting work, I think, everywhere from like Eastern Kansas and Nebraska to, California, Washington, Rochester. We are working this year to make sure that we can get communities to participate from all 50 states. I'm doing a lot of outreach right now in Idaho and Wyoming, and North Dakota, South Dakota, places that, we weren't as connected to the work that was happening in those places. So that's where it's heading. The idea, just to sort of give you a sense of what the challenge is Anybody can participate, including elected officials, including, we encourage folks who work at transit agencies, transit boards, who maybe themselves don't ride transit all the time, to really take this challenge and try to not drive themselves for 1 week. Doesn't mean that they can't get rides. Getting rides is often an essential part of getting around in a lot of parts in this country, and if you don't drive, so you can ask for rides. If you can afford to, you can pay for rides. And you can walk, you can roll, you can take transit, and you can share what you've learned on social media or in reflections with us as the organizers, and use it to inform what you work on as an advocate, what you work on as an elected leader, what gaps you experience, and maybe what's working really well. Maybe you have a really wonderful experience riding the bus, and that carries forward with you as you work to make transit better throughout the year.
Absolutely. And I love that you spread this out, not just to urban places, but rural places. You said Eastern Kansas and Idaho, you think of these as just these really rural places, but there still are huge disability needs and huge needs for people that do not drive. I mean, I grew up in a small town in South Georgia, and I didn't have a car for a while, and I always wondered, how am I going to get around? So next month, we're actually celebrating National Rural Transit Month, National Rural Transit Day, excuse me. So, are those based off your experiences, like living in rural Washington State, or did you also see, that possibility of also reaching a new audience with that?
Yeah, rural, I think, growing up in a state that has a lot of rural areas, it's, I guess, yeah, I've always sort of seen that as part of the work, right? Like, there are people who can't drive and can't afford to drive and are too young to drive and too old to drive in every community, including in rural communities. And, there's work happening in Wisconsin. There's a non-driver advisory committee that their state DOT convened, and they did a bunch of research there looking at, what counties, what areas have the most non-drivers, and some of the rural areas actually had some of the highest percentages of non-drivers in those states. Like, it wasn't just big cities, right? Because owning a car is expensive, and as our cities become more expensive, more and more folks, right, because of that high cost of living, are going to be further and further out. We see that a lot here in Washington State, where perhaps young disabled folks who grew up in rural areas would love to live in a city, but the cost of doing so is prohibitive, and so they're at home with their parents because that's where they can get support, but then they can't get around independently. So that can be really challenging. Also, out west in a lot of our tribal areas, there's really car ownership isn't universal, and so we need these rural transportation systems, and tribal transportation is often an example of what communities design when they recognize that there are many non-drivers.
Absolutely. We're about to get into the question and answer portion of our system, but I wanted to brag on you in this book as well. I don't think you've seen how the amount of support that there's already been for this book. We've had everyone from the War on Cars comment on this book, Seattle Bike Blog comment on this book. There was even a Reddit thread on this. I don't know if you've seen this.
I haven't seen the Reddit thread yet.
There's been a Reddit thread on this, and it comes from Fuck Cars, essentially. But it basically thanks you, basically saying Anna's one of us, and it's from a Reddit thread that essentially is anti-car dependence. But one of the comments basically said, "This proves what I say all the time in real time. Real disability rights activists are against car dependency. Anyone who says disabled people need car-only infrastructure is enabled who has no clue what they're talking about." And someone else below says, "Anna's the real deal. I follow on Twitter for years." How do you feel about all this overwhelming support for this, and especially now that you've come out with this book?
Yeah, it's exciting to feel that it's resonating with folks. I, was doing an event in San Francisco and had someone there in the audience talk about, share his experience as someone who couldn't drive because of a disability and had never really heard that reflected other places, and was so excited to connect with other people who are also, trying to make our communities work better without car dependence. I will say, because our communities are so designed around cars and car mobility, and the distances are so great and lots of things are inaccessible, I do want to recognize that there are, disabled folks who, cars are the best transportation option for them, right? And I think, that I'm not saying that should be taken away, and I want to be explicit about that. That because our many of our cities are so inaccessible right now, and our transit systems are inaccessible, and the distances are so long. That is the truth too. But it's also not a majority of folks, and because of poverty in the disability community, car ownership isn't guaranteed or universal, and that many of the folks with greatest needs, even if car mobility could be usable for them, car ownership is not feasible. So just want to be precise about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not that we don't like cars. It's just we want to be able to build a world where you don't need a car.
Exactly.
It
right?
is nice for some things. Like we've seen all these stories about and seen these pictures of people lugging furniture on public transit, as well as like the big thing with a lot of folks is carrying groceries. Like most people don't think about that, and I think that's something that's really key and profound with the Week Without Driving is being able to implement daily things in your life and wondering how people are going to do this without a vehicle. And especially for people who've driven their whole lives, of wondering and now experiencing, I got to carry 3 or 4 bags on a bus or on a train, and how difficult it is. And especially if it's snowing or if it's raining, that's some of the stresses that a lot of people, like myself included, I don't own a car. So I think that's a huge stress point that, Week Without Driving exposes.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. And I think that the profound thing about this too is that, it's not, while the Week Without Driving is sort of about individual choices and asking people to experience it, what the message I want people to walk away with is not that it's about your choices or how tough you are or, how committed you are, how hardcore you are to being a non-driver or to not using a car. It's really about, we've created a system where driving is often the easiest and cheapest and safest and most convenient option. And that works for some people who can afford cars and who can drive, but it doesn't work for a lot of people. And it also doesn't work for us collectively. And so thinking about, this as a system that we need to move away from so that it's not the default choice. It's not the easy choice, that there are better choices that are more inclusive for everyone.
Absolutely. And we're definitely on our way to building better choices. The union-led Brightline West is definitely going to open up options for people getting from Las Vegas to Southern California, Brightline spreading through Florida. And of course, like all these corridor ID projects for Amtrak, reopening a lot of their lines as well as pushing new lines out. I think that really would, kind of get this country to look at, we were built on a country where we didn't drive, and we could definitely rebuild this country, but in a way that honors folks who don't drive.
Yeah, exactly. And the train piece is exciting, right? I took the train over to Montana this winter to visit some family and with my kid, and it was so much fun, and it made me never want to get on a plane again. And then I started doing the math and being like, because I have to go to DC a lot for work. I was like, what if there was a train from Washington State to Washington, DC? How fast would it have to go for this to be like a reasonable trip? And it's actually like, I mean, if we have a maglev train, it would be totally like a high speed, like comparable to flying. And even without that, even just a high speed rail, like the places we could get in our country, we think of it as overwhelmingly big, but it really does, start to make sense. And there's so much money pouring into mitigating climate change and, electric vehicles, electric cars, trying to figure out how to replace, gas powered cars with electric cars. And it's frustrating that rather than questioning car dependency and what we could be building instead, we're sort of just digging ourselves deeper in or just, continuing the status quo, right? And which excludes so many and has so many other costs that we're not really reckoning with.
Absolutely. Are there any final thoughts that you'd like to let folks know about the book or about any of the work that you do?
Sign up for Week Without Driving. That's the takeaway. I think it really does, it helps individuals sort of understand systems better, how they work, how they don't work in your community. And it also is a wonderful organizing tool to connect with other groups who have similar interests. Perhaps there's disability groups, perhaps there's climate groups, perhaps there's transit groups, unions, groups who do active transportation, biking, walking, rolling, safe routes to school. This is a way to come together and, similar to Transit Equity Day, really talk about how systems are working and not working for people, and what we can do to make them better. So sign up weekwithoutdriving.org, and there's lots of resources there, and also lots of other sort of webinars to get more information if you want to get more support.
Absolutely. And if y'all like a pamphlet of it, we have a pamphlet. So Monday, September 30th through Sunday, October 6th, 2024. We'll definitely put all the links into the chat, as well as the in our Transit Equity Network listserv. If you're not subscribed to our listserv, definitely subscribe. If you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel or our Facebook channel, please subscribe. We're going to be putting a lot of great information like this. But Transit Equity Network is definitely going to be participating in this because we think this is a really amazing program. So we absolutely thank you, Anna, for this and all of your work. It's scrolling down below, but if you want to buy When Driving Is Not an Option, definitely we will put the link into the chat. But if anyone has any questions, I dropped the link in the chat. So if you want to come up, or if you just want to put your link in the comments, we can answer any questions. But yeah, it's amazing to do a lot of this work, and especially from the standpoint of someone who doesn't own a vehicle. And quite honestly, I don't want one. I mean, I know I've experienced a lot of stress with doing all of this, and especially, that stress of missing a bus and knowing it's 20 minutes to the next one.
Oh, that's the worst.
Or missing a train and knowing that it's probably not going to come for another hour. Like, how do you deal with that from a personal standpoint? Like,
yeah, I mean, honestly, Twitter has been a venting place for a lot of my frustrations, when that happens. And it does feel, nice when it's a way to sort of express that. So I think that's part of it. I think, doing the organizing work is also part of it. And also, I think, though, as someone who's been sort of in organizing spaces for a long time, it can also feel hard. And so I think a lot of it is for me trying to figure out, this is going to sound really cheesy, but where are the moments of joy in it? And as a parent, especially when you miss that bus and then you've got to keep a kid happy for another 20 minutes when you're also grumpy, it sort of has helped me, transform the way I think about things. Because if I'm in a really grumpy mood about, missing the bus, then it's going to be even harder to not have the kid have a meltdown. And so really trying to find, what other things are beautiful about, things when it takes longer, spending a lot of time on a train to get to an activity. It's time that we can spend together. It's time that he can read and do mazes. It's time that we're, out in the community and, in a space with all different kinds of people, which I think is something that often is lacking in so many of our environments these days. And so, trying to figure out what are those things to celebrate, even when things are frustrating and annoying. And, you're standing in the rain and you just missed that bus. So one other thing about the book too, while we're waiting for questions, I just want to, the book is great. If you can afford to buy it, that's terrific. I also do a lot of my reading from the library, and so really encourage you to request it at your library. I know that, library systems can order it, and that's a great way to make sure that other people get a chance to read it too. So I guess even if you can afford to buy it, please also request it from your local library, because that's a way to make sure that it gets out there to more people.
Absolutely. We got a question for Kathy. Will you do a national book talk during Week Without Driving that communities can have as a local Week Without Driving event?
Ooh, that's a great idea. I would love to make that happen. And I will see if we can do that. That's a really terrific idea.
Absolutely.
Still trying to figure out what the fall looks like and what Week Without Driving looks like. And balancing some local stuff with some national stuff. But that's a terrific idea.
Absolutely. Bossoff also agrees with you. Time on the train is a good time to read a book. It's often the only time I have to read in a busy day. I don't understand how y'all can read on a train. Like, it's so loud and there's so many things going on. Or maybe it's just me and where I live.
Yeah. I took a bus to high school, and so I got really good at not getting car sick and doing all my homework on the bus, so that I would not have to do it at home. So I feel like it's a learned skill, perhaps.
Maybe. I don't know. There's too much going on, and like I don't know if I maybe have like that anxiety of I've really got to keep all of my eyes and ears peeled and my head on a swivel at every single time. I mean, I used to do that in Atlanta because Atlanta was pretty, pretty safe. But now I'm in another space, and it's just I have to watch everywhere I go. Like, did you ever feel that in New York?
Not so much. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like my sort of hardest transit experiences were in Seattle, sort of in the depths of the pandemic when it was really, I mean, I really appreciate that our bus system kept going and they really did actually even increase service on some of the routes where there was still a lot of folks riding. But there was just a lot of chaos. I think a lot of people were under a lot of stress. And so those, I think for me, those were the hardest times on transit.
Gotcha. Anything else, or are there any other questions from the audience?
Well, I hope everyone has a really wonderful weekend. Oh, it looks like we got another question.
Private Street Coalition says, as a person with low vision, what accessibility accommodations are you most interested in advocating for helping folks navigate the built environment?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think I've been thinking lately about this, with different kinds of disabilities, there are lots of things that, individually would help each of us. And we all, disability, even between individuals with the same disability, often, what works for us is different. And so making sure that systems can, provide as much as that as possible and that we have access to those, aids or accommodations. And then also sort of the counterpoint to that is designing systems that have as many ways to use them as possible so that they can be as accessible, to the broadest range of folks. For me, a lot of what would make systems accessible is around wayfinding and signage. I have a very difficult time reading most font sizes that are, like on signs. And so I love signage that's on the ground. That is something that I like, arrows and, color-coded stuff, or even, when street names are printed on the sidewalk instead of up on poles. For me, that's really great. But for people with different kinds of vision disabilities, that isn't as helpful. And people need braille, or some folks are really excited about wayfinding that uses Bluetooth, or wayfinding that uses other sort of mapping systems that can point out landmarks. So lots of different things out there. And I think what I've learned for as long as I've sort of been active in the sort of disability community and engaging with people with different kinds of disabilities is that, that having as many different sort of entry points and ways for people to use the system, and perhaps even duplicative ways, so that when one way fails, when your cell phone dies or something's not working for you that day, that there are backup systems. That's really what makes systems accessible.
So, kind of to add on to that, what do you think are the low-hanging fruit for that? Would you say it's wayfinding, or I also put into the chat, there's a petition from Propel ATL to keep an entrance open for MARTA's 5 Point Station, which is their main train hub, and then I know it also has a ramp for people with wheelchairs. So, what would be the low-hanging fruit for agencies if they did want to invest in things like that?
Oh gosh, I mean, I don't know if there's a low-hanging fruit. I think it really is about sort of creating as many systems as possible, but also recognizing that at the end of the day, people are, for transit agencies, right? Like, people use transit and want to use transit because it's frequent and it goes where they need to go and it goes there reliably, right? And so we can't forget that that's really the core of what, these systems need to provide is transit that runs where people need to go frequently and reliably. And if that is happening, that's the first point. Making sure the systems are accessible is equally as important as far as having ramps and having elevators and having functioning elevators. I can't, believe, some of the legacy systems on the East Coast, right? No elevators. But just as, annoying perhaps, or even more annoying because they were built, post ADA, are systems on the West Coast where they'll build a system, a station with a single elevator. And elevators break like they do. They're machines, things go wrong. And when that single elevator breaks, then the station is inaccessible. And it's like, did you not have the foresight to recognize that at some point, like, everything breaks? And if the system's going to remain accessible, you at least need two, right? So, anticipating some of the things that are going to fail, I think, is important as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Katie Hall says, I'm involved with a local organization that's trying to improve our transportation discrepancies in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Being disabled in a wheelchair, how may I help more?
That's exciting that you're doing that work. I would love to know more about your organization. And if you're interested in connecting more with national conversations, we definitely would love to have you as part of Week Without Driving. We also have an informal group of folks that meet to talk about sidewalk access and what advocates in different cities are doing around the snow removal, around sidewalk repair, around missing sidewalk construction. And so if that's something you're interested in being part of, feel free to shoot me an email. And I'll make sure, Bakari, you're welcome to put my email in the chat for people to reach out to. Or you can go to annazivarts.com and you can contact me there. There's an email link as well. So, definitely happy to connect, and also know that I think, there's a group in New Mexico, Together for Brothers, that I know does great work, and I think is interested in doing Week Without Driving. So, if you are interested in Week Without Driving and collaborating with them, we can get you connected.
That's it.
Yes, it's Together for Brothers. Oh, cool. Awesome.
Amazing work out there down to Albuquerque, New Mexico. We also have William Hamilton. Now, they also do wonderful work down in Charleston, South Carolina. He says, access to the beach was a 7-year struggle for us in Charleston. We finally won it back in 2021. Now we use pirates to promote the bus. If you can see some of these pictures that they've done, it is very interesting, and I absolutely want to go back and do it.
That is awesome. I went to Charleston this year, and the beach is beautiful. Everyone should have access to it. There's my email. Great.
And that's one thing I thought about. MDOT sent a survey out to residents of Maryland about increasing the bus service. And they asked about locations of where would you like to see the bus go to? And I always wondered, I would like to see the bus go to the beach, because I do want to take a beach trip, but solely through transit. And the most accessible part for me from the DMV is to Atlantic City, because I would just get on Amtrak, go to Philly at 30th Street, and then get on New Jersey Transit. And the beach will drop you off 4 blocks from the boardwalk. And I always thought of that as, this would be very difficult for somebody without a vehicle. And especially in these hot months when, places like Atlantic City were built just because it was a refuge for people that did not have air conditioning or did not have a pool. So, I think that would be great to look at projects like what they're doing in Charleston, of highlighting that, hey, people without vehicles also like to access the beach. We would also like to access amusement parks. This is important for us.
Yeah, no, I think that the access to recreation is so important. And, part of it's having those spaces close to where we are. But part of it's also, how do we make that transit work, and how do we get transit to think about getting there? I have a colleague who worked with me in Disability Rights Washington for some time, and is now starting a project called Transit Trekker that's really focused on transit access to open space and parks and recreation, and thinking about how do we pair sort of the rural transit piece, right, with making sure that people who want to access some of these national parks or other parks, regional parks, can get there. And so we, fund both rural transit and access to green space through improving rural transit. So I think that's really exciting. I know I'm really enjoying right now the fact that I'm in a really rural area. I've been out for these long walks every day because it's not something I get to do very often as someone who can't drive. It is, hard to get to green space. And I know, Seattle King County Metro is probably one of the agencies that's thinking about that. We have a a bus that goes, to the mountains during the summer. We have a bus that goes to the beach pretty near my house. That's exciting, but that isn't a guarantee in a lot of systems.
Absolutely. And shout out to Providence Streets Coalition. They said that Rhode Island has an express beach bus service that starts on June 29th.
Oh my gosh, this is making me just want to do a book tour focused on buses that go to the beach and have like a beach bus tour. That would be so much fun.
That would be amazing.
Wouldn't it?
They also says Sierra Club's Transit Trails Initiative is all about that kind of access. Yeah, and we showed the video in the beginning of that kind of the access being able to be had with a lot of systems. And I know I used to do that in Atlanta with taking the train to the Parker Creek Trail that went to the West Side Park, and it was just such a departure from the hustle and bustle of the city, and it's just so amazing.
It really is. And I don't know, beaches and too, I just love that there are these public spaces that, at least in the city I'm in and now in Seattle, there's not a lot of places that are, public spaces that are full of people. And Alki Beach, which the 50 bus goes to, is that space. And as a parent too, you just like your kid, get there and they find another kid to play with, and it's great. And I don't know, it sort of gives me faith that we can have public spaces and shared space in cities and have that kind of community. So we need more buses to get there.
Absolutely. Well, are there any other questions from the audience? Or if you'd like to join the live stream for a few minutes before we let Anna go, definitely click the link and you can come on. But Anna, once again, thank you so much for joining us and giving us all this lovely atmosphere around you. But yes, y'all definitely go and buy the book. When Driving is Not an Option, Steering Away from Car Dependency. Y'all already saw it's getting really wonderful reviews online, but please go buy the book wherever books are sold. Island Press, it's also on Amazon, and definitely request it in your local library if you can. This is definitely the kind of work that we need and that we need to do to change the narrative about people that don't drive, as well as transportation decisions. But hold on, we got one more question here.
Shout out for your hosting. I'm just watching you sort of click around and do this all, and it's tough. That's some skills to be able to both talk and manage all of this.
Technology.
Yeah. It's impressive.
Sherry says hello from Atlanta. The bus of the beach is definitely gone through. Katie says thank you so much, and she'll be in touch. Bossoff sends thank you from DC. Bossoff, thank you so much for sharing the Dakota Access Pipeline work. That's a huge benefit, and we're definitely going to promote that again. But yeah, thank you all so much, and Anna, thank you so much for taking time out and definitely sharing with us a lot of the great work that you're doing.
Before I sign up, I'll show you the view behind me, which is just like, I'm going to stand up and you're all going to be like, whoa. I don't know if you can see those mountains. Anyway, it's pretty here. And there should be a bus here too. Yeah, but thank you. Thanks so much, Akari. It's really been awesome to get to chat, and wonderful conversations, wonderful network of folks doing great work.
No problem. You're welcome back here to the Transit Equity Network at any time.
All right. Take care.
Thank you. Take care. That was wonderful. A huge thank you to Anna Zivarts. And like I said, definitely go get the book. It's a lot of wonderful information in there. The book, once again, is When Driving is Not an Option, Steering Away from Car Dependency. Please go get the book. We will drop the links into the chat so that you can all purchase the book. But yeah, I also wanted to, like I said, point out again, there's a rally going on at the White House on June 11th at noon. Definitely hit the QR link if you'd like to RSVP for the rally. And we will also be dropping the link in the chat as well. We've got a lot of other events. If you're in Baltimore, Baltimore Transit Equity Coalition, or BTEC, will be hosting a Which Way Forward dinner. Join the Baltimore Transit Equity Coalition for a dinner and an interactive discussion on transit equity, our environment, and the next steps to grow our city. There's been a lot going on in Baltimore with the tunnel and the lawsuit that's going on with that. We talk about an accessibility issue, but they're still steadfast in trying to get the red line up. So if you'd like to go and just discuss and figure out a way to organize, definitely join them Wednesday, June 12th, 2024 from 6:30 to 8:30. The details will follow. Also, if you're in Atlanta, MARTA Army will be hosting a meet and greet. They're going to be doing a meet and greet. Now, we've done this in the past years ago, and we're bringing it back. So if you'd like to chat about transit over beers, definitely come to the Wicked Wolf in Atlanta on Thursday, June 27th from 6:30 to 8:30. The first beverage is on us. So the details will follow us that. If you're also in Atlanta, they're starting up the book club again. They will be reading the Beltline Emerald Necklace. It's a book on the Beltline and what it originally was supposed to be. So if you'd like to join the book club, if you're in the Atlanta area, definitely we will put that in the description as well. Once again, if you'd like to learn about Week Without Driving, we at the Transit Equity Network will be promoting that, and definitely email Anna if you'd like to learn more about Week Without Driving. It's a wonderful program. So yeah, definitely check that out. Also, if you see our lovely banners on the bottom showing all the news stories, definitely show love and email me if you'd like to get your event posted. If you have any event that you're going on with that's going on within your group, or if you have any news story coming out of your city, like I know Detroit's had a lot of great wins. Cobb County in Georgia's had a lot of great wins with putting transit back on the ballot for November. Also, if you're in Chicago, the Metro trains will be free for Saturday and Sunday. But if you have anything that you want to promote within our Transit Equity Network, please email me at bakari@laborforsustainability.org. Again, that's bakari@laborforsustainability.org. And with that, I thank you all for joining us today. This was a wonderful discussion, and we're going to continue to have more of these throughout the year. Please join us next year. Not next year, sorry. Please join us next month. We've got some really wonderful things coming up the pipeline. We're speaking with some folks in Philly about some organizing around saving Chinatown in Philadelphia. And we've also got some things coming up for National Road Transit Day. So definitely join us for next month. And it was great to see all of you and to hear all of you. Please share this video with friends, with your networks. We'd love to continue a lot of this work and also push more of Anna's work, like Week Without Driving in the book that she's written, more to more groups. So please share this with your networks. Share this with someone that you may know that would really benefit from this. And definitely, if you have any questions, email me at bakari@labor4sustainability.org. We thank you all for joining us, and signing off from the Transit Equity Network. My name is Bakari Height. Thank you all for joining us. Have a good one.